Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on your location. My name is Brandon Hill. I'm the Marketing Director here at Fuel Cycle by Passenger, and we're very excited to have you on for today's webinar. As you know, we have a guest speaker, Forrester, with us today for 4 approaches for building an online community that works. A couple of housekeeping items before I introduce today's speakers. We will probably go around 35 minutes in terms of the total presentation before we will jump into Q&A. Erna, our Forrester analyst on the call today, will probably go around 25 minutes, and then Rick Kelly, here with us at Fuel Cycle by Passenger, will go for 5 to 10, and then we'll jump into the Q&A. So as such, feel free throughout the presentation to submit your questions into either the question box or the chat box in the GoToWebinar control panel. And then, of course, we will be recording today's presentation for distribution after the webinar. You should all get that usually in about 24 hours after the live presentation. So keep an eye out for that for any follow-up questions or references you might have. So as I mentioned, we are joined on the Fuel Cycle by Passenger side by Rick Kelly, Vice President of Client Services. I somewhat joke that every time I introduce him as one of the smartest people that I've met in this industry, and I'm always excited to have him on the webinars with us. Rick has spent most of his career in the market research industry, working closely with clients and operations teams to ensure client needs are met. He has published articles on market research methods and delivered presentations at the MRA and much, much more. He is a source of constant reference here for the marketing team, as well as all other departments here at Fuel Cycle. So again, we're always excited to have you, Rick.
Thanks, Brandon. I'm flattered and look forward to talking to everyone later.
Thanks, Rick. So as I mentioned, Rick will come on towards the end of today's presentation to kind of summarize what we've heard and some key findings. Of course, the main presenter today is Erna Alfred Luisas from Forrester. She is an analyst serving the B2C marketing professionals. She focuses on her research on social media marketing, covers always-on brand programs, online communities, and social media technologies. Prior to joining Forrester, Erna was a consultant at a marketing strategy firm. There she designed, developed, and facilitated marketing excellence programs for chemical, healthcare, and technology sectors. Erna has published a number of pieces for the online community space, and we are very excited to have her doing today's presentation. So with that, Erna, I'm going to let you take it away.
Thank you so much, and welcome everyone. So today we'll be discussing community, how to use it, and the benefits it can bring. I figure I'd just dive right in. Now, the title of our webinar, of course, is 4 Approaches to Building Online Communities that Work. But what is community? At Forrester, we see that the marketing definition of community has evolved. It can either represent a purpose-built environment created on a brand's domain and maintained by such brands, such as what we see here with Sephora's Beauty Talk site, or, or it could mean a self-selecting group of people that return time and time again to connect with one another about a particular topic on a social network until a purpose-built community emerges. Now, how do we go about using such communities? As you think about community, there are a couple of questions, 3 precisely, to ask yourselves. The first is, will you own, borrow, or participate in the community? You can either take complete ownership of your community by creating it yourself, or you could borrow the space from an existing site by setting up a presence there, or you could just simply participate within an existing community when it's appropriate. The next question you should ask yourself is, where will this community exist? If you own your own community, it can exist solely on your domain. But when you borrow a community, it's housed within a social network. For example, think about your brand's Facebook page. Participating in a community involves engaging in a conversation with a community that's organic, that's already active within a social network or its own space. The last question has to do with length of participation. So when you own your own community, your commitment is pretty much for the long term. But borrowing community implies that you don't own the domain where the community resides, but your brand is connected with that community over the long term as well. And of course, participating within a community indicates just a temporary visit. Now, these questions actually unveil 4 different approaches to community. These approaches are what you see here: a brand-focused community, topic-focused, a company Q&A, or a promotional community. We find all of these approaches are used to achieve different marketing objectives across the customer lifecycle. Now, when a brand uses a brand or product-focused approach, what they're doing is leveraging their own website to create that concept of community. The brand dictates the purpose of the community and defines how or in what context it will interact with its members. Brands design the experience that best meets their overarching goals and can incorporate such features such as conversations, polls, ratings, reviews, and blogs. When we refer to a topic-focused approach, the goal here is usually to literally focus the conversation on a specific topic as opposed to a specific brand. These communities tend to not live on the brand's main website. Rather, they live on another domain, and they're often permanent. They do offer little to limited brand visibility in itself because of its purpose. We tend to see more of these within healthcare, and I'll actually show you an example of one a little bit later. The company and Q&A approach is an example of how brands can participate in organic communities created by other parties. Of course, marketers need to understand the communities before participating in such conversations. Reddit is a great example of a network with over 231 million unique visitors monthly. It provides a multitude of opportunities for brands to get unbiased opinions from a range of customers. But remember, members rule. Last but not least, of course, are our promotional communities. And these come into the mix when brands are borrowing that concept of community. They borrow by setting up their presence on specific social networks, such as Twitter, Instagram, and the like. Now, brands can promote products through the use of social ads here, as well as interact organically to start connecting with their customers. We advise our clients to use community across all 6 stages of the customer life cycle. At Forrester, we feel that the customer life cycle helps us remember and think through different touch points with our customers. At Forrester, we define it as the enterprise's view of the phases that a customer passes through in the course of an ongoing relationship with the company. We put the customer in the center because they're the buyer, and the stages of the life cycle represent the actions that customers typically take on their journeys. Our marketing objectives, in turn, should connect to these actions, and ideally, the overall experiences provided across the life cycle are representative of the entire brand, not just marketing. Remember, our customers don't see us as individual departments. They only see us as one brand, and our interactions should convey that. The customer lifecycle graphic is a circle because the relationship with our customers is ongoing. A sale doesn't automatically generate loyalty. Brands have to earn that loyalty and continue to cultivate it. Ultimately, that's what creates our advocates, the folks that are proactively sharing our experiences with one another. And that kind of marketing you just can't buy. So I'll take the next few minutes to just go through the phases of the life cycle, quickly and share examples of how community approaches can be employed. The first phase of our life cycle is the discover phase. This is the process that everyone goes through when they want to discover a brand, a product, or a service. Marketers, in turn, within this phase, have to think about how they can actually meet the needs of their customers and think about what that response to those needs look like. The example that I have here is actually that of Reebok. I had the pleasure of actually interviewing their senior manager of global social media, Ben Blakesley, and he mentioned that Reebok uses Twitter and Instagram in particular to drive this particular approach, primarily because they are in the midst of a brand repositioning. They've gone from being a sneaker company to being a fitness company. So if you think about tough fitness, in their words, things like the Tough Mudder races, that's really their bread and butter at this point. So they focus on supporting those efforts and getting customers healthy enough to compete in such events. In turn, Reebok and their efforts are all around getting that conversation going with customers and prospective customers in this respect. His team definitely focuses most of their energy on organic efforts, but if they ever do need to boost any particular post, they work with their media team to do that. So this is a great example of that promotional approach that I mentioned earlier. As we continue in the life cycle, we move to the explore phase. Now, this is when our prospect visits an online store, perhaps they read some product information, they look at ratings and reviews or questions and answers, and the like. They're essentially getting more information to make the decision as to if they're going to purchase. Now, social media provides user-generated content, such as literally actually pictures from a customer's own life, but it also provides ratings and reviews and questions and answers. Now, within this phase, marketers should think about the information that would be most helpful to customers to both answer their questions and prompt them to convert. The example I have for you here is that of Consorsbank. This is a German virtual bank, and they actually use community to empower the new self-directed customer with access to information or the means to connect themselves to others who can provide assistance. The Consorsbank community provides ratings and reviews, allowing existing customers to answer questions from prospects. As we continue throughout the life cycle, we then move to the buy phase. Actually, before we're moving to the buy phase, I mentioned earlier that I would share what a topic-focused community looks like. And the example I have here is the Hearing Like Me community. It's sponsored by hearing device manufacturer Phonic. Phonic uses this community to provide a resource to customers who are either supporting someone they love that is coping with hearing loss, or perhaps they themselves are coping with hearing loss. The purpose of the community is to connect folks to one another and to share resources. Those resources range from doctor recommendations to just everyday tips on navigating challenges that come up. So what I like about the explore phase is that it really gives brands an opportunity to employ multiple approaches, as you see here, either doing that purpose-built, domain-based community or that topic-focused approach that we see here. And now we'll move to the buy phase. So this is where people buy the actual product or service. And I thought a great example of this was Neil Young's topic-focused community, Pono. It provides visitors access to the Pono music player, which is another means to hear music the way it was meant to be heard, like that vinyl sound. And it also is a place to talk about all different types of music. The community addresses many phases of the life cycle, including buy, such as discover and explore. And it blends the typical community format along with e-commerce functionality, basically giving everyone a one-stop shop to listen to, appreciate, discuss, and ultimately purchase music. Now, as we continue our journey throughout the life cycle, we come to the use and ask phases. In the use phase, customers do exactly what the phase is called. They actually use the product. And in the ask phase, they reach out to either the manufacturer of the product, the retailer, peers, or other support mechanisms to get specific service or assistance. A great example of a community working, again, across multiple objectives within the life cycle is the craftsman community. They enhance their overall customer experience by creating a single platform that allows customers to showcase their do-it-yourself projects and actually get advice from one another. As I mentioned, the community does everything from supporting exploration because members share their projects. Other people can learn about the tools or methods that they use for such projects. It also addresses the use phase because members are sharing experiences as to why or how they've used a myriad of products. We see the ask phases here as well. Project dialogue basically creates an exchange around advice and preference of tools. And of course, within the engage phase, which is coming up shortly, we haven't talked about it yet, but this is an opportunity for the facilitators of the community to actually find ways to cultivate additional loyalty and thank members for their contribution. So that engage phase that I just mentioned, it's all about remembering that the journey with the customer doesn't stop with the purchase or the use of a product. The engage phase reminds us that loyalty and advocacy are extremely important to our relationships with our customers. In fact, 32% of consumers say that they keep in touch with a brand to make sure they're getting the most out of their purchase. If we think about it as well, regular engagement with a brand promotes rediscovery with an existing customer, and it can actually accelerate the opportunity or the dialogue around another purchase, a complementary one. An example of engage that is quite interesting is that of the Italian soccer club AS Roma. What I like about this is the fact that this soccer club has a fantastic community within Reddit. All of its fans go there and talk about all sorts of things. The company or the club itself decided what better place for us to go to actually get insights about what our fans are looking for than Reddit. And they employed this approach of getting their head of digital along with a small team within the club to start talking with fans specifically about their goal, which was to recreate or rather revamp their website. In fact, their head of digital actually said about this entire process, the only brands getting killed on Reddit are the ones who don't understand the platform or their place in it, or they're being less than truthful about their intentions. So we've talked about all of these different approaches. At the end of the day, what are you getting as a marketer from community? You're getting a multitude of approaches. And honestly, the benefits actually depend on which approach you choose to employ. If you focus on the brand approach, that purpose-built approach I mentioned earlier, you're really thinking about fostering deeper connections with your customer through discussions and through an assortment of interactions that not only allow you to connect with your customer, but also let your customer to connect with others. Think about the members of the craftsman community, for instance. We found out that they actually spend 5 times more on craftsman products than other craftsman consumers. So that speaks to the value that they get from this community. If you employ the topic-focused approach, you're basically surfacing information such as consumer challenges, experienced by folks you don't typically get to interact with because they may not be customers. You can leverage this information into insights which could potentially inform new product ideas or services or even expose you to a new segment of customers. The company Q&A approach is great for getting some unbiased opinions from a range of people. If we think about REI actually experienced this last year. They participated in an Ask Me Anything discussion on Reddit around Thanksgiving time last year. And the purpose of it was to talk about why the brand decided not to participate in Black Friday. Really interesting discussion. Look it up. I'll leave it at that. The last approach we discussed was the promotional approach. So this is where you're leveraging your social networks to capitalize on the fact that they have access to targeting information that can ultimately lead you to place the right ad in front of the right consumer. Brands that do this well focus on organic interactions as well, in addition to social care. Both of these components lead to brand familiarity and connection. They can also lead to insights and supportive customer retention efforts. So at the end of the day, today's community is really different. I mean, if we think about the earlier days of community management, that was a centralized function. But just like social media, it has evolved into a distributed function. And it now encompasses the development and management of social media policies, content, funneling feedback throughout the organization, and even maintaining a knowledge base of the brand's most vocal advocates. Community is now in the position to help organizations truly tackle the silos that have resulted. And the data that's coming out of these communities can be aggregated and packaged in a manner to benefit the entire organization. So lots of upside with community. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to turn things back over now to Rick.
Hey, thanks so much, Erna. I really enjoyed that. Like many people, I'm a big Reddit user, big community user in general, and I'm excited to share more about what we do and our platform here. So just for people on the phone who may not be familiar with us, FuelCycle is an online SaaS, so software as a service platform. It's a community platform. We built it to allow brands to engage with their stakeholders, whether those be customers or employees or partners. It's a way for the brand to engage. And really, when you look at Erna's breakdown of the different types of communities, whether it's owned, borrowed, or a brand participates, we really fit into that own category. So it allows an organization to own their community, and most of our communities end up being brand and topic focused. And one of the things that we'll talk about today is that our community platform ends up becoming a tool for the entire enterprise. So whether you're focusing on research and insights, some customer intelligence, or you're in marketing and advertising or product management, or you have internal employee communities, or you're looking at customer experience, customer care type things, our community platform ends up being the platform for the entire enterprise to get feedback from customers and interact with people in an owned environment, which I think is pretty critical. So when we look at the things that are different in a community platform, the value that we provide to our partners and clients, we really look down to the things that are, and ask ourselves, what's important in a community? Well, number one, our community has countless capabilities, right? So it's owned by the brand, but it gives you the ability to run discussion boards, focus groups, surveys, user-generated content, to have people post photos and videos and other forms of rich media. And we also have a full suite of reporting and analytics tools built into the platform. It's text analytics, it's sentiment analysis, all those things that you need to get more information and more data and insights out of your community, we provide all within a single unified platform. It's much more than just like a panel or a set of surveys. In fact, I was looking at some data yesterday afternoon. Over the past almost 3 years, all the data generated in our platform, about 40% of it is qualitative and 60% of it is quantitative. And really being able to unify both that quantitative and qualitative aspect within the platform, or methodologies within a single platform, ends up being very valuable for our partner organizations. What also sets us apart is an incredible user experience. We know that in a frenzied-paced, a world where consumer attention is constantly pulled elsewhere, they need to have an incredibly positive experience with the platform that they're using in order to keep coming back. If they find friction points or it's tough to use, then in many cases that'll lead to drop-off and a lack of engagement. And so we really prioritize user experience, both from the community member perspective, but also from community manager perspective. So we build tools that make it easy to publish content, to share information, and interact with stakeholders. And the third thing is is that really we're more than just mobile friendly, we're mobile native. So the community is designed for use on mobile devices. Of course, it can be used on desktops, but we know that, again, in a busy world, most of the time that we're going to find people interacting with a community is when they have a moment of downtime. It's they're standing in the shopping line, or they're commuting, or whatever it may be. And so we have to be built to be accessible across any device. And so, our enterprise-grade community allows you to do a lot of different things in an incredibly friendly user environment. I think one of the stories that really illustrates, the enterprise-wide aspect of the community and how it's being used is from, our client and great partner, Rent-A-Center. So Rent-A-Center came to us, a year and a half ago, looking to build a tool to gather customer insights that can be used across the entire organization. And so what they've done is they built a 3,000 plus member community, and community members come from both customers and prospects, right? And then the content within the community is tailored to the persona or the audience. So customers see some content, prospects see other content, and so by prospects we mean people who aren't Rent-A-Center customers yet, but they fit in like the the demographic or psychographics of those who could become Rent-A-Center customers. And community members, as you can see, there's a lot of engagement in there. So over 86% of them participate, and they interact with one another to not only provide feedback to Rent-A-Center, which is an organization that they care about, but also they interact with each other to form opinions and to help and receive help from one another. So they make recommendations on different products or topics or different types of things that this audience really cares about. And then, of course, the most important thing here is that this is truly an enterprise-wide tool. So what that means is that there's a really broad set of internal stakeholders that the community serves. So whether it's marketing, looking to get feedback on a potential advertisement or like ad evaluation, or operations, trying to understand where to send product and differences and regional differences in product delivery, and then product or marketing, right? It truly spans every aspect of the enterprise, and they found immense value in delivering information and allowing the entire company to have access to their customers all the time. So again, I think this is a great illustration of how a customer community really spans an entire enterprise and is valuable for the organization. So with that, I think we'll jump into a few questions from both myself and for both myself and Erna.
Awesome. And to follow up on the Rent-A-Center example, Rick, we've got a video that kind of highlights that success story that should be coming out soon. But to sort of tease it a little bit, it's incredible to see the amount of excitement from the various departments at that organization and the way that they have used the community. So,
yeah, definitely.
All right, so we've got about a handful of questions that have come in so far. For those that have not submitted a question, feel free to do so. We are monitoring and standing by. The first question, and I'm going to throw this out to Rick, but Erna, if you have any follow-up on it, please chime in. Any industries that are particularly suited for communities?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think, both Erna and I highlighted a few communities, like whether it's athletics or, retail, whatever it might be. But really, I think that it's important for any organization in any industry to find ways to interact and understand their customer. And so we see a lot of success across a number of industries and verticals. So a number of our communities are in financial services, as well as like media and entertainment. And so I think that developing a successful community really just, it depends on having the right platform and the right, mode of interaction with the customers, and then developing a good reason for people to be there and to participate, but it can work well across any industry. Erna, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, Rick, no, I think I completely agree with everything that you said. It really comes down to being very clear about the value that you're going to be providing your customer or your prospect, being very clear as to who they actually are as well to start with, and then also making sure that you have the proper internal resources to support that community. You don't want to start something that you can't finish, because that's a letdown for both your organization as well as the customer. So making sure that you've thought through ahead of time what internal resources you'll need to support the community and to keep it going, as well as what resources you'll need to actually push out the valuable feedback that you have as a result of creating the community is key.
Awesome. Thank you, Erna. Okay, so next question. Do you have examples of B2B companies with communities?
Yeah, so this is Rick. I'll go ahead and take a stab at this one. So I think this is Cameron who asked this question. Thanks for the question, Cameron. So yeah, about 30% of the communities that we operate here are B2B, and so they're targeted at a B2B audience. And so whether that's a group of scientists that participate in a community, or small business owners, or insurance agents, or insurance brokers, there's a large number of B2B communities and use cases. Really, the differences between B2C and B2B, there's a number of them, but really in a B2B environment, community members tend to be looking for more ways to, more information to help them grow as a professional or to get ahead in their industry. And so, when we focus and deliver on a value proposition that includes those types of things, we see high engagement from B2B audiences.
Awesome. Okay, next question is from Alex. What has driven, and again, I think this will be a great question for both Rick and Ernest, so I'd love to get both of your feedback on this one. What has driven communities from solely a market research tool to the other aspects of the enterprise that you mentioned?
Yeah, so maybe I'll jump on this one first, and then Erna, you can come in after me. But so I think traditionally there's been this division between customer support type communities and research-oriented communities, where it's very much like small groups just purely focused on market research. And what we see is really that as communities become more publicized and they find more stakeholders within an organization, or people see how quickly they can turn around insights activities or within a community, that really multiple departments want to have access to the community, and in turn that means that the community grows in size, and more people use it more frequently as they get information out of it. Erna, maybe I'll flip that over to you as well.
Yeah, no, I totally echo your sentiments. And as I mentioned during the presentation, I feel like community's resurgence, if you will, is reflecting the evolution of social media across organizations as a whole now. So as more people start to see this type of information or insights that are pulled from community environments, the more they're prompted to actually look into their own little domains and realize, wait a minute, I could also derive some value from this and I could participate. And not only does that benefit manifest itself in something that customers can feel, because now there are more people for them to discuss more things with, or more perspectives to be entertained. It works really well for the person who's managing the community, because now everything doesn't necessarily fall on them. So you can use these stakeholders to help you generate additional types of content. You can use these stakeholders to also help you package some of the insights that you're able to pull out as well. So it's a win-win for everyone involved.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, our next question comes from Pam. Do you find many clients that develop different communities for each step of the customer journey? So instead of having just one or two communities, they end up with 5 or 6?
Yeah, so,
No, go ahead, Rick. I was just saying,
so,
good question.
Yeah, it is a great question. So Pam, that's a great question. I think like the Rena Center story that we talked about, where they have both prospects and customers, in a single environment, and then they just silo some of the content and publish content to different audiences. And so you'll find that yes, the short answer is yes, that many of our customers use the community for audiences in different stages of the customer journey. Most times it ends up being a single environment, and they use our flexible grouping and segmentation tools to put the audience in the right place. And so most definitely moving people along in the customer journey from initial interest to evaluation, product feedback, post-sale support and care is a use case that we see frequently. And the nice thing is that brands that we work with get our flexible segmentation tools and allow them to do that in one environment for that particular audience.
Awesome. Okay, next question comes from James. And Erna, this might be a good one for you to talk to, but Rick, I'd love for your follow-up after. So what is the difference between a social community and an owned community? And I guess the owned community would be like what we provide here at FuelCycle. Erna, I know you touched on that a little bit, but do you maybe want to recap that?
Sure. Definitely. So an owned community is one that is actually owned by the brand. So the brand has a much larger say as to what the overall experience is, as well as how deeply they want to connect with customers. Whereas a community, which we would refer to as a promotional approach to community that takes place on a social network, is a much, insights can still be gained from that, but the brand has no control over the actual domain that network is sitting on. And the rules that, I'm thinking of Facebook in particular, the rules that sometimes govern the way that information is presented. Brands don't have any say in that process. So it's really good from an awareness perspective, for sure, and from an engagement perspective. But if you want to deepen the level of connection you're having with a customer, an owned community is definitely the way to go.
Awesome. So then, Rick, I'm curious, maybe it's important to point out the benefit to an owned community, or why is that important?
Yeah. So the owned community, like Erna highlighted, it means that a brand has control and they have access to information. So for instance, if you build a community on top of a social network, which we all love and use, you don't necessarily have control over the algorithms behind that, or the advertisements being shown on on a page next to your community, or whatever it may be. And so by building a community that you own, you have a lot more control and direct access to the customers. And of course, the most important thing here is that you have a lot of access to data and much more flexible access. So you're getting sentiment analysis, text analytics, significance testing, bunch of reporting tools that you aren't going to find baked into Facebook.
So I've got another question from Pam queued up, but I did want to point out we actually have a really interesting white paper on our website, fuelcycle.com, if you go to the resources page, that we did a white paper on the difference between social communities versus an owned community and some of the benefits. So anyone on the phone who's interested in learning more about that, I encourage you to check that out. On to the next question. So Pam has a follow-up question. Do you find that members of a community become more critical over time? So they would need to not necessarily represent the average customer or prospect.
Yeah, so I don't know that there's anything necessarily that would say that community members become more critical over time. I think when they have a poor experience or have frustrating time, they might voice criticism. But really, I think strong governance rules for a brand help resolve some of the criticism, and having a clear escalation path for for customers who encounter an issue is great too. So getting feedback from people, showing them that you care and that you're going to follow up on their feedback ends up being really valuable.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think there's anything that would say that people can become more critical over time. And really, when there are, instances where people are critical, strong governance and great moderation helps overcome that.
Yeah. Great. Erna, any follow-up on that?
I would just add, just again echoing what Rick mentioned, people just need to feel acknowledged. They want to feel heard, especially if we're talking about someone who regularly spends their time within the community. So being very clear as to your internal processes, what they are to actually deliver that type of support is really important. So wouldn't necessarily say that people are more critical, but for regular folks that do visit a community often, they're definitely a bit more invested in the brand and care a bit more than the average consumer.
Yeah, and I think, it's like that story you told about Craftsman, Erna, where, purchase, the volume of purchases went up over time. In our communities, we actually see NPS scores go up over time the more that they participate in the community, because they're more invested and, tend to have a stronger relationship with the brand as a result of their participation.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about that idea of customer centricity, right? Like, customers want to be heard, they want to be valued, and they want to feel like their opinions matter. And if you can accomplish all of those things, which you can do quite well in a community, you tend to get more of a positive outcome over time than a negative one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, next question comes from Victoria. Any best practices in terms of the approach for launching/running a community?
Oh, yeah.
Probably a good one for you, Rick.
Yeah, I mean, Erna's also a community expert, but there are a host of best practices. Really, we have a pretty strong implementation onboarding process here. Really, the keys that I would set up are to recognize, just these are very basic things, and they might sound simple, but number one is to recognize that these are people, not just usernames or data points, right? And so focusing on the fact that these are people and developing a compelling reason for participating in the community is very important. And revisiting that frequently, making sure that we're finding ways for people to participate and that we're touching all the customers that we ought to is very important.
Any follow-up on that, Erna? I'd love to get you've talked to a lot of different people out in the field. I'd love the commonalities or best practices that you've kind of heard of or seen.
Yeah, so just a couple of things. I'd say the first thing has to do, again, with what Rick mentioned, acknowledging these are people, but also acknowledging the fact that they're taking time out of their day. And we all know how short we are on time. So making sure that the community is serving up information and value from their perspective, not just the brand's perspective, is key. That will help you actually retain the people that you have in the community, and it will also motivate them to want to continue participating. I think the other aspect is something that I alluded to before as well, which is really trying to get at these kernels of insights that pop up within the community. It's great to actually aggregate them and then disseminate them within your organization, but also reporting back to the community what you're actually doing with some of the information is also another key to keeping them invested and letting them know that you're not just paying them lip service.
Yeah, that's a great one that we emphasize frequently too.
Cool. Well, I think we've run out of questions, so that puts us at about 45 minutes, which is exactly where we were hoping to be, to make sure that everyone had time to get to their next scheduled meetings and appointments, as I know we all do. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. As I mentioned, we will be sending out a follow-up with a recording of the presentation. Feel free to reach out to us. If you have follow-up questions, we'd love to hear from you. Most of all, I want to say thank you to Erna and Rick. Thank you both very much. I thought this was really well done.
Yeah, thank you, Erna.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.